Okay, 5e DMs always getting burnt out. It seems like 5e has a culture of running DMs into the ground. Is it just me, or do you really never hear about this kind of thing in other games? Is it just the Matt Mercer effect taking its toll? I don't run 5e myself currently, and when I did, I still couldn't wrap my head around what other DMs were doing that was causing them to lose sleep over this game. I'm not being snarky, I really do not get it. Recently, I've been actually clicking on my Reddit notifications, especially when players have some kind of issue or some kind of question that I think is worth exploring. This one in particular stuck out to me because I have been seeing a lot of posts about DM burnout, and I've also been taking the time to play a lot of other games, and by extension exploring other games communities. And having been a game master that's experienced burnout a number of times, I want to see if we can unpack this a little bit, and if you're experiencing burnout, maybe come up with some solutions that may help alleviate its symptoms. Hi, I'm John, this is Dragon Mind, where we discover our best selves through gaming, and today we're going to unpack DM burnout. Let's get into it. So let's start with what DM burnout actually is. And I am going to say DM burnout because, like the poster said, this is something that tends to come up more often with Dungeons & Dragons than with other game systems. Although the reason why might actually be a little simpler than maybe where their head was at. To me, DM burnout is creative exhaustion that can happen for a number of different reasons. And because of that, how we approach our solutions is going to have to do with identifying the root cause. The difficult thing about it is a lot of times you don't even really recognize it until one big thing. And really, a lot of times you kind of have to get ahead of it, designing habits or behaviors that help nip it before it becomes a big problem. Because when it becomes a big problem, this could be a major reason why a table might actually fall apart. The easiest symptom that I think most people can relate to is when you're thinking about your game, maybe prepping it or running it, and you get that little flinch at even the idea. That means burnout is at least starting to happen, if not having already taken hold. Now, I do want to loop back to a part of the original poster's question, which is, why does this seem to happen more in D&D than in other systems? And while D&D's culture may be a part of it, I saw a lot of comments on this post pointing to the kind of tools that DMs are expected to have, or the amount of content that can get thrown a DM's way that they then have to adjudicate and rule. I honestly just think it's just a numbers game. Whether you like it or not, Dungeons & Dragons is the most popular TTRPG. It's what most people recognize, especially if they're not already in the hobby, and it's honestly kind of the easiest sell. Like, if I were to approach a group of my friends that have little to no TTRPG experience, and I'm like, hey, do you want to play Vampire the Masquerade? I'm probably not going to hook them as easily as if I were to say, hey, do you want to play some D&D? There's just such a ubiquity with that brand. Again, whether you like it or not, and also for most TTRPG players, there's a familiarity with what D&D is that it feels like the easiest system to kind of throw together, which also means you're getting the broadest range of different play styles, play preferences, different expectations. So I think it's naturally going to have the greatest probability of having some kind of mismatch that again can contribute to DM burnout. By contrast, I feel like GMs that want to play other systems oftentimes are starved for wanting to get a group together. And so any amount of playing those other systems is inherently going to be exciting and energizing. Because the expectations are usually much more clear and specific, it becomes even more obvious when there's a mismatch. So it's just, you don't hear stories about burnout happening in other systems as much, as far as I know. Hey, if you've experienced some kind of game mastering burnout with a different system, let me know in the comments below. Basically, I don't think it has anything to do with 5e's culture or the unfortunately named Matt Mercer effect. I actually am not sure 5e has a unified culture to begin with. So before addressing the rest of this post, I do want to take a little bit to maybe explore why burnout occurs. One example from a different Reddit thread I found discussed burnout because of a mismatch of player expectations and styles. This DM is pretty clear that they're story focused. They really like the world building and plot design and character development. And while some of their players really bit the hook on that, other players tended to be more passive. And so they were burning out on trying to engage those passive players. Look, it is totally cool to really care about everyone having a good time. But sometimes it's best to recognize that those players are going to make their choices, and there's only so much you can do to engage them. A lot of times this ultimately isn't even really a problem. If they just enjoy being part of the table and they're not really being disruptive, if they just choose not to engage as much, it may be disappointing, but I'm not sure it's really a problem. However, when a DM feels like their game has to be a certain way, that's when you start to get the kind of symptoms that the original poster was talking about, like losing sleep over the game. They're putting a disproportionate amount of energy to try to force an outcome that they're imagining, rather than recognizing the energy their players are bringing to the table and then trying to match it and make the best of it. Which ultimately is kind of what DM burnout is to begin with. A depletion of energy, either because your players are demanding too much of it, or in this DM's case, because they're just putting out a bunch of energy to try to engage players that are defaulting to being more passive. That's one of the reasons I came up with the 7 baby steps to masterful game mastering. Especially step 1, running one-shots, allows you to get on the same page with your players and either adjust your expectations to the kind of game that they want, or to essentially train them to become skillful players so that you can run the kind of complex campaign that you're dreaming of. For example, another post I came across was about a DM that was frustrated that they had to keep teaching their players the same mechanics over and over again. And hey, I've totally been there too. There's one campaign in particular that I remember running where I basically had to resign myself to the fact that combat was probably going to be monotonous. The players just didn't really have the bandwidth to learn complicated features or different spells, and ultimately they were having fun just chatting up NPCs and engaging with the story, and when it came to combat, just rolling simple attacks in order to see how much damage they dealt. That was a game that was fun for them, and it was pretty clear that if I tried to push anything more complicated, I wasn't really going to get a strong result. However, there have been plenty of other tables where players may start out new or not really knowing the game's mechanics, but by designing scenarios a certain way, especially in one-shots or episodic scenarios, eventually they build their skills so that I can start throwing tougher and more complex combats their way. So yeah, ultimately I think the way to prevent burnout is to be clear about the game that you want to run, or to be clear about the game that your players can handle and how their enjoyment will energize you. But what happens when you realize that you're burnt out? That for whatever reason you weren't able to prevent it, or some things have happened that just have led to you feeling creatively exhausted? Well, given that burnout is just a depletion of creative energy, it's going to be a little different for everyone, but you want to find a method to recharge yourself. For some DMs, that means taking a break. It means maybe closing the story arc that everyone is on, maybe even prematurely. Maybe it means shortening sessions or getting together less frequently. It could also mean just falling in love with the kind of fiction or stories that have energized or inspired you in the first place. For example, one of the TTRPGs that I've run at times is based off of Mobile Suit Gundam. So when I watch a Gundam movie or I rewatch a series, a lot of times that gets me re-energized for wanting to run that kind of game again. It could also mean asking somebody else to take up the role of DMing for a little bit. Recently, in the game I mentioned about whether or not D&D 5.5 is a good starter system, I intentionally formatted the game so it would be a series of one-shots. And it turned out really early on, I was actually unable to attend a session that the other players were able to. So I asked one of the other players if they would like to try DMing a one-shot. They liked it so much that they became the regular DM of that table, and I became the substitute in case they were busy. In a lot of ways, I found that really recharging, mostly because as a player, I'm able to model what I really like about the game, so that when I'm the DM, the players have an idea of what my preferred style is, and also what becomes possible within the system when you know the rules. And ultimately, there isn't a perfect solution for this. That's one of the reasons this topic ends up resurfacing and looping over and over again. Because if there was a perfect answer that worked for everybody, then that would be the one that everyone would be prescribed. Ultimately, just as each DM and each group of players is unique, so too are going to be your solutions. So even though these might be some ideas to try, you are going to need to experiment a little to see what works best for you. So now I want to hear what all of you have to say. Have you experienced DM burnout before? Were you able to find a solution that worked? And are there maybe underlying causes for DM burnout that I didn't identify that you think would be helpful to share? Let me know in the comments down below. In the description below are links to playtest materials for my TTRPG Swiftguard. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. It is built off the same scaffolding as D&D, but has some significant adjustments that should change the way the game feels. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments below or in the Swiftguard community Discord. Have an awesome day, and remember, your story matters. Bye-bye now.